My job at Solarport is head of modular PV. So that's a specific product in Solarport's range that Segen are now stocking. And really, the goal of the webinar, I think, today is to give you a brief introduction to Solarport. Some of you might be familiar with us as a company already, but not quite know about our modular system, or we might be brand new to you. So I want to give you a quick overview of sort of who we are and what we're about. And then we'll delve into a few details on our modular system that Segen is stocking and the advantages and features of the system for ground mount PV. So without further ado, Solarport is actually the leading UK manufacturer of PV mounting systems. We manufacture everything we do in the UK through 2 factories. We were founded back in 2015, actually, by engineers and designers. And the industry has changed quite a lot in the 9 years or so since Solarport was founded. And Solarport has actually changed a lot. It's gone from a small company to now the leading manufacturer in the UK for mounting systems. But it's still a family-run company and still with the same principles that it was started with back in 2015. So firstly, Solarport was really created to provide the highest quality mounting systems to enable long-term growth of the solar industry in the UK. With this, we've really started off by looking at design and manufacturing processes, and we're actually really proud that we managed to gain multiple ISO accreditations to show to our customers, whether they're large EPCs or small installers, that we're doing things according to the best practice. So apart from designing and manufacturing ground mount systems, another key thing is the materials that we use. So ground mount systems are predominantly made of steel, and really the quality of the steel that you use has a massive impact on the overall quality of the system that you've designed as well. So we use a very high grade of steel S450 across all of our systems. This is a high tensile strength steel. And then recently we've actually moved exclusively to using a coating on all of our steel called ZM. So there's different grades of this, but essentially ZM coating, zinc manganese coating, is an alternative to hot dip galvanizing. And it's really the coating on the steel that provides the long-term quality and the resistance against corrosion over a long time. And we've moved to this manganese coating as it provides a greater resistance against corrosion and all sorts of great longevity qualities with it. Because of this, the high quality steel, the high coating on the steel, actually our standard warranty for our systems start at 25 years now. That's something that's industry leading. We can also offer longer warranties when ground conditions and local air conditions allow for, but this actually brings our warranties up to the standard or above standard of any competitors that we've got in the UK, and we're confident that our systems are really built to last. So along with this as well, we've really invested back into the company in the last few years to make sure that we can keep up with the ever-expanding solar industry. So we have a production capacity per year of the equivalent of 2 gigawatts peak power. This allows Solarport to actually work with the largest EPCs on the market, doing large-scale, multiple tens or even hundreds of megawatt sites around the UK and Europe. And then it also allows us to have capacity to service commercial and domestic customers as well. So, yeah, just with that, some of the challenges that all solar PV installations have with ground mount. One is quality, which I think I've just touched on as fundamental part of Solarport, and we're super proud of that. Another one is ease of and speed of design. Now, in larger scale utility projects, these tend to be longer projects which can take multiple years to complete. And there's a long design process, and we actually have a team to support designers in our EPCs, and we have internal designers, engineers, structural engineers as well. This process can take time with longer projects, but as you get a bit smaller into the commercial side of ground mount, so when I say commercial, we're really talking about tens of kilowatts up to a few megawatt size commercial installations, and even smaller than that into domestic installations. There's still a great need for a warranty you can rely on and quality. But where the challenge lies often is around how quickly can you easily price a job, get a quote, how quickly can you have it delivered to site, and how easy is it to install. And that's really where our modular product was born. So our modular ground mount system is a really specific range of a product in Solarport's line. It's separate from our custom utility scale, custom designed systems. What it is a 2-in-port tray off the shelf system. So we've chosen some parameters for typical commercial and domestic ground mount systems, and Segen is stocking this 2-in-port tray fixed tilt system so that that they can provide a ground mount solution that's versatile and high quality, and the warranty can be relied on, and they can provide that really quickly to installers such as probably most people on this webinar. And really now that's what I want to get into, is what is the modular system from Solarport? How do we design it? How do we spec it? How do we support it as well after it's been delivered? So, first of all, a couple of examples of a modular system. So we launched modular at the beginning of last year, and since then we've delivered up to 20 megawatts across domestic and commercial installations all around the UK and Ireland, and a few in mainland Europe as well. But here's just a couple of examples. So a 2-megawatt site up in Scotland. This was private connection for a business. This went into powering their business directly. Again, off-the-shelf standard system that we could supply quickly for the private customer. So we'd class that as commercial installation. Now, on a slightly smaller scale, but still sizable, there's a 211 kilowatt private connection down in Cornwall last year, completed at the start of winter. So the system in Scotland and the system in Cornwall, essentially the same system, a 2-in-port tray system, but spec'd for the specific site that they're going to. And then looking even smaller than that, here's just a simple example of a 25 kilowatt system. This is actually a domestic system for a fairly large house. So it took 60 modules. But again, this was domestic, and this was installed in the back garden for a customer. And yeah, it was exactly the same system as went into Perthshire in Scotland at 2 megawatts. And we've just got one more example to show you of a modular ground mount, and that was somewhere in the middle there, a 1 megawatt site that was actually completed for one of our customers, Anaron Renewable Energy, and they installed this system in the middle of last year for the Ford plant in Daventry, and they were kind enough to share some footage of the install. So what you can see here is a 2-in portrait, fixed tilt, twin posts, so an upright at the front and the back system, where they've used a piled foundation, a driven piled foundation. You can see the piling rig going along there. And this is the sort of size and scale of what a 1 megawatt site looks like. And this time lapse shows the couple of weeks it took them to install the piles, install the tables. Yeah, and as you can see, it's a pretty uniform setup where the rows are split into tables of varying sizes. But what's great is that we could quote for this job really quickly. The installer had used exactly the same system before, the same installation manual, the same way it went together. They knew what was going to turn up on site. We were able to deliver it at fairly short notice, and they were able to, install it within a few days, regarding like the piling, the framework, and the paneling. So that's now up and running, and good to see the sun shining down on the panels already. Okay, so that's a couple of examples of the modular system. I just want to go through some of the specifics of how the modular system is specified from an installer side, and the key things that you'll be looking for when you're looking at a ground mount project that you want to do. Now, probably the most important part of our modular system and why it's called modular is the fact that from the same system with a small variation in the number of different parts, we can supply tables varying anywhere from 4 panels up to 60 panels long. So typically speaking, no installations would use tables longer than 60 panels. They would normally go up to 60 panels max, and then split rows into appropriate sizes. But being able to go from 4, adding on 2 panels at each time, is one of our really key USPs, where we can really quickly tell you what the bill of materials needs to be, tell you the price, tell you the lead time, show you really clearly how to install it. And it can be for a table of, as I say, 4, add on 2 panels at a time, all the way up to 60 panels. Regarding site design, that's really important, as you have not really any restrictions as to where you fit the tables in, depending on the mounting system size. So you can start off with your layout, put your panels at the optimum place that you want them to be, and then our modular system will fit underneath that. How this actually works in reality at the moment is, I think Brogan mentioned earlier, the Segen design tool is under development. So pretty soon you'll just be able to go through the Segen design tool. You'll be able to select, okay, table 1, I want this many panels, table 2, this many panels, and it will automatically pull out bill of materials for you. What we would still be able to do, even with a design tool, and the process now actually is that if you just contact your Segen account manager, they'll be able to give you a simple inquiry form to fill in. They'll be able to guide you through it should you need any help. But essentially what it says is, what panel are you using, and what table sizes do you need for your project? And then there's a few other questions on details on the system, which we'll go into in a second. And yeah, again, that really just allows flexibility, versatility. Another key thing to look at when specifying any ground mount project is that you want an optimum panel angle. Unlike roofs, with ground mount, you can specify a system to the optimum angle. Now, in the UK, we tend to see projects looking for anywhere between 20 and 30 degrees for south-facing systems. The modular system's been just specified really simply. You can either choose 20 degrees, 25 degrees, or 30 degrees. So there's a simple change in bill of materials when you select either one of those, and you can then you can then align that with your PV software or your design that you've done. So that's really a brief overview of the ease of commercial design and ease of site planning with modular. What you're also going to want to know is that the steel and the framework that you've specified for your site going to work in the location in the world that it needs to be. So if, to start with, we just take the above ground, so all the framework above the foundations of the site, first thing we want to know is for the wind and snow loading and corrosivity of the air, will our system work there? Now, we've specified our modular system to be capable of being capable to withstand wind loadings of up to 28 meters per second. This will essentially cover most of the UK, and where we say sort of engineered to cover 80% of the UK mainland, that really covers all of England and really just excludes some really extreme places in the UK, like the Highlands of Scotland, or anywhere with particularly steep or challenging terrain and topography, where would be a not sensible place to put a PV system anywhere. So it's always best to check local wind speeds, but essentially our system is capable of covering most of the UK. Again, on corrosivity above ground as well, we've gone for a standard ZM310 coating, and across the UK, the air corrosivity isn't so harsh that we can't offer a 25-year warranty in any area of the UK mainland, really, regarding corrosion on that. So this is fully structurally calculated, and that's also another advantage of the modular system, is that it's been pre-structurally calculated. So where you're designing a system specifically for a site, you then have to look at structural calculations for that site and the expense involved in that. This can just be confidently specified and put into site, knowing that it's designed over and above the local conditions. Another key thing really is the ease of installation. So there's one thing around specifying the right system for the site. Another real key thing when you're looking at cost of system as well is how fast is it to be, how fast is it going to be to put into the ground and install. So there's a few design principles that we look at. So for example, we've got one size of fixing throughout. The modular design will only be in two sizes of bays. We now use a Z-shaped rafter so that installers on site can use their gun to install certain sections of purlins to rafters, for example, instead of having to use a ratchet. We make these little tweaks to the system just to make sure that, if we can save the installer a few seconds and make it simple and easy to put in, then that's time and money saved on the install itself. And then that was the above ground, the installation. And now probably the hardest thing to spec in any ground mount system, and what we get the most phone calls about, inquiring about, and where we can provide the most technical support, is choosing the right foundation. Solarport's got about 9 different foundations for its ground mount systems. Modular uses most of those. They're all completely interchangeable with the above ground system. And the idea is that we have a foundation solution for any ground type and any site requirement as well. I'm going to spend the next few minutes just explaining the most common ones that get used, as they cover a vast majority of the projects. But the important principle of this is one, to understand the foundation options that Solarport provide. 2, that they're completely interchangeable on any system. So systems can use multiple foundations if you have particularly challenging areas of a site, or even down to the local challenging few meters of a site of where you want to put your specific system. Yeah, and then 3, understanding how do you match those foundations to the ground that you have on your specific site, and how can Solarport and Segen help you make sure that you get the right foundation for your site. So I'm just going to go on to a couple of specific foundations. They each have advantages and disadvantages, and let's take a quick look. So here we've got the most common foundation in ground mount solar PV. So across the UK, most commercial size sites will use a driven pile foundation. So a driven pile simply is either a C or a V sometimes of metal, and it can be of varying lengths. In modular, we've picked one specific length to standardize standardize the specification, which is suitable for most ground conditions. What's really great about a driven pile is they're very quick to install with a piling rig. They're very efficient with use of steel as well. So they both keep install costs down and system costs down. And the piles we use have the highest grade Magnellus coating as well, so they can be used in very corrosive environments when necessary. Now, that's great, but for smaller sites, there's a few things to consider. One, you're going to need to have a piling rig, be able to hire a piling rig or subcontract the install to a company that can pile. And 2, you're going to have to make sure the ground is suitable for piling. So our modular piles go a 1.5 meter embedment into the ground as standard. So prior to going to site to install the whole system, you're going to want to ideally have a ground survey, ideally have some pull-out tests where you've already gone along, driven some sample piles into the ground and tested the loads on that. Now that can be, potentially a little bit intimidating to a new installer not knowing how to do that. But regarding pull-out tests, that's something that Solarport can help directly with installers on. So you can come through Segen, or you can come directly to us to discuss it. We'll discuss the specific site you're talking about. We'll discuss what pull-out tests we think are necessary. Solarport offer their own pull-out test service where we'll go along with our own people and equipment and do that. And there's also multiple other contractors that are able to do that according to Solarport's specifications. So it's something that doesn't need to be intimidating, but can be supported by Solarport and ensure a sort of a cost-effective install. But doing tests like this before you get to site obviously does cost. So the smaller system you have, the more you have to consider, okay, what's value for money foundation-wise and install-wise with the pull-out test costs and the system and full install costs as well. So what we typically see is, very roughly anything under sort of 100 kilowatts, we would look more closely with a customer actually what foundation is required if you don't want to go down the driven piled route. Another simple option is to stick with a pile but have a concreted pile. So we supply shorter piles with, instead of a 1.5 meter embedment, they have a 1 meter embedment, and we specify that the installer should just auger a hole into the ground 1 meter deep, 300 mil wide, and then use postcrete to affix those foundations. That's often a really popular installation choice for installers on smaller systems in particular. You can see that in the diagram just above the main piled diagram there. Okay, so that's the piled foundation used on a lot of bigger sites, but the next foundation I want to show you is actually something that's patented to Solarport, and is unique to us in its design, and that's our X-anchor foundation. So I just for anyone that hasn't seen this before from Solarport, I just want to explain the basic principle of it. You can see at the top of the screen there a diagram with the main square body, and that's the foundation that will just sit on the ground. It doesn't need to be driven into the ground. That body then uses 4 900 millimeter long rods to be driven at angles through the holes in the body into the ground. So they can be driven in manually with an SDS drill or with a sledgehammer, but without any heavy machinery required. And compared with piles, the actual embedment is only around 600 millimeters. So the risk of hitting problematic ground conditions vastly reduces. One, if you're using thinner rods to penetrate the ground, and then two, if the embedment isn't quite as much. So essentially they're a really good option where the commercial project is on the smaller side, as you can turn up to site and install these foundations with hand tools and know that they're still specified to the same structural standards as the piles, as the rest of the system. We've done a lot of testing on this, and I'm really confident in how they perform. They are also really good for remote locations, for bigger sites where you can't get heavy machinery out to the site, as you just have to basically take the system itself and hand tools to install them. We found on some of the larger sites, even, they've been trusted by big EPCs to install on sites where only shallow embedment's necessary. So a really good example is landfill sites, where you just have a thin layer of soil and top material above a landfill. We've done multiple megawatts across Europe actually on landfill sites with the X-anchor system, but they're super versatile and and can be used at sites large or small. And for our modular system, they've actually been our #1 selling foundation. So if you want to see how they work, please get in contact directly with us, and we'll be more than happy to show you and go through the process. Okay, so those first two foundations were where we could actually penetrate the ground, whether that's piled or with X-anchor. Of course, there's going to be sites where you just can't break the ground. There might be geotechnical reasons for that. There might be archaeological or particularly sort of planning or environmental reasons for that. We've got a couple of variants of our ballasted system, essentially a system that's weighted down on the ground with concrete. Our standard ballast foundation is a steel plate, roughly square, on the ground that connects to the bottom of the above ground frame, and then you can stack concrete blocks onto it. So big advantage of this is that that can then be put down by hand. The concrete blocks that the installer would provide, would be standard sort of 18 kilogram concrete blocks, high density concrete that you'd get from any builder's merchant. So that can be, easily assembled on site without having to move heavy concrete cast blocks or plinths around the site. Yeah, again, this is really nice solution where you can't break the ground. It's typically a choice that's second to ex-anchor or piled, and really is just when you can't use one of those foundations usually. Now, again, just to reiterate, using small concrete blocks on a steel plate means you can put that in by hand. Now, there is an alternative to this, and it's very similar, but instead of using a steel plate, we have a direct fixed ballast foundation. So it's essentially the system of our ballast, but minus the steel plate. But when you minus the steel plate, what you need is one solid concrete block. So you can either use a precast concrete block according to our specifications, or pour your own concrete, as long as it's within the specifications that we would require. Then the system can be anchor bolted into the ground. Essentially uses standard through bolts, and then as long as your concrete's 300 mil deep and is of required weight, then that's sufficient for us to be able to guarantee the modular system. Yeah, so really, that is the main foundations that our customers use. As I said before, we offer up to, I think 9 foundations now, variants of different systems. That includes ones I haven't shown today, but ground anchors, ground screws, I know some installers are very familiar with. We can certainly specify those to our system as well if the installer wishes. But hopefully that's a good overview of how our system has various foundations to cope with any sort of challenging ground conditions. Just before we sort of summarize everything, I just want to mention that, again, we manufacture everything in the UK. We hold a stock of modular. Importantly, Segen are now stocking modular, and they offer very fast next day delivery for the systems as well. So it's actually possible to, design a system in the morning, have it quoted by lunchtime, and then arrive on site the next morning, should that be required. And think to have that service and capability, and then have the confidence that actually you're getting a system which, even the largest energy companies in the UK or even the world rely on quality-wise, and know it's fully structurally calculated. I think that's actually quite, unique offering that Solarport's got here. And we've had a fantastic response from customers on our modular system since launching last year. And we're super excited to be working with Segen. With working with Segen, we are collaborating on them holding stock for us. We're going to be doing some marketing events with them. Segen have a stand at Solar and Storage Live next week, actually, next Monday and Tuesday, 29th and 30th of April. Solarport will be on that stand. Either myself or my colleague Niall will be there throughout the 2 days. So please, if you're going, come and say hi on the stand, have a chat to us. We'll have some more information on our systems. We'll be able to go through anything you want on any upcoming projects you have. We'll also have a couple of examples of foundations that we can show you if you want to get hands-on, say with the ex-anchor or ground anchors, just so you can see parts of our system in person. Unfortunately, there wasn't quite space to fit a whole ground mount system on Segen standalone. They had to share their space a little bit, but yeah, we'll be there and we'll be available to talk to you. So basically, Joe's asked, is there a carport product suitable for 8 to 12 cars in car parks at a business premises? Yeah, so sorry, Joe, this product is really a ground mount system. That's what Segen is stocking. Solarport at the moment provides or has in the past, designed and supplied carports on an individual basis with going through a design process for specific car parts. At the moment, we're just producing ground mount. There's a bit of innovation going on behind the scenes, but yeah, at the moment, there's no carports available, I'm afraid, from us. Stephen's asked, for the X-Anchor foundation, do you offer various lengths of inserts? Yes, and well, yes, we do. So if by that, essentially with the X-Anchor body, you have 4 rods that go through. We've specified a standard rod at, I think, 935 millimeters, and in testing, that's proved to be about the optimum amount to be able to cope with most ground conditions and still provide the necessary sort of pull-out forces that we're looking for. For particular sites, with feedback from ground investigations or pull-out tests, we can actually specify the rods to a different length. That would tend to come down the custom route the custom route of design. So that's something that we could still do through Segen, but we'd certainly want to talk to you directly about any pull-out tests or ground investigation reports that you've got. There's a question on planning requirements. So yes, typically any ground mount system would need planning permission. That's not, we don't really get involved in that. We're happy to provide specifications of our systems to help with the planning process, but as far as I'm aware, most ground mount systems require planning permission, but obviously check with the local planning authority. Okay, a question from Stephen, as well as pull-out tests, do you offer soil corrosivity tests? So we work with a number of geotechnical companies. Although the pull-out tests we offer in-house, we don't actually have the required in-house capabilities to do soil testing and corrosivity testing. We have quite a lot of experience in working with some of the best geotechnical companies, though, and we're more than happy to speak to them on your behalf or put you in contact with someone that can carry out those sorts of tests. A good point as well, actually, is that we also provide an ISO standard for those soil corrosivity tests. So it's always worth speaking to us first about it, and we can show you, if you're going to go and arrange your own ground investigations, these are the things that you want to be testing for to allow us to make a sort of complete assessment of the system. Okay, so there's a question from Kai about spacing between rows to prevent shading. This would tend to come down to site design. So there's so many factors that affect that. System tilt angle, ground clearance, local topography, where you are in the world, etc. That's a separate thing that a lot of PV software deals with, and there's lots of online resources to help you calculate it already. So we tend to essentially spec the mounting system for your layout. As a really rough rule of thumb, for small sites, we say leave 5 meters between rows, north to south. If that's a good starting point, if you're just looking for sort of a rough layout to begin with. Yeah, so Sophie's asked us, we install systems in the northeast and north of Scotland. Will it be suitable to install in this area? So yeah, we're talking about Moray, Aberdeenshire, Highlands? Simple answer is yes, but there's obviously some areas up there with quite extreme weather. What we would usually do and encourage a customer to do is look at an online resource for local fundamental wind speeds, so fundamental wind velocities. This is what we warrant our systems against. It's a Euro code of local wind velocities. There'll be certain areas in the Highlands that systems would require maybe a modified design to be able to cope with higher wind speeds. Not many, but there might be some. If you go on a website called Delubal, that will show you the wind speeds throughout the UK. And knowing that our systems can be spec'd up to 28 meters per second, should be able to let you easily type in the postcode of the site that you're going to install at, and then you can essentially see, does that match up, or is that within the tolerance of this system? If it's on the limit or ballpark, pick up the phone to us. We're here to help. Talk you through specifics of what the options are. So, what's the approximate cost for a pull-out test? So that is a really good question. That can change massively. So where you are in the world, what we actually need to be testing for, how big the site is. It's easier probably for me to say that you're starting at a couple of £1,000 probably. It's always worth getting a direct quote and looking at the best option. There's also a difference in pull-out test requirements if we're looking to use an X-anchor system or a piled system. And obviously the size of the site dictates the amount of locations that we need to go to. And then obviously for the larger sites, there's an efficiency to be had there as well. So yeah, I'm sorry, there's no easy answer for that. But if you're able to send over specifics of a site, we can give you a quote for a specific site, and that should give you a good ballpark going forwards. Also, just us at Solarport are based down here in Dorset. We have a team of people, whether that's in sales, sat next to engineers and designers. Feel free to pick up the phone to our office or email myself or Modular at Solarport Systems with any questions you've got. We can provide technical assistance. One thing mention before going back to Brogan, just going back to one question on pull-out tests actually around, are pull-out tests required for every site? No, they're absolutely not required. So we normally do pull-out tests for larger sites to ensure the piling capabilities of a site. If you're confident in the ground that you're installing at, and used our systems before and know it's a garden or agricultural land, a lot of our customers will buy our system off the shelf without that pre-investigation. So I hope that helps. Anyway, thanks very much for everyone that took the time to log in and listen to me just talk about our modular system for a while. I'm going to hand you back to Brogan now, just to wrap up.
Thank you, Pete, and thank you everybody for joining today. As mentioned earlier, all the products are live on our system, so if you want to log in and kind of check pricing and the products on there, and as well if you need any support with a quote, if you want to reach out to your account manager, and they'll be able to support on that front until it's in the design tool. Yeah, I think that's everything. So thank you all for joining, and hope you have a lovely rest of the day.